Blender uses a slightly unique feature, a tool called the 3D cursor. And this 3D cursor can be found on your toolbar, and it looks like a little life preserver on the left. And if you click that, then it allows you to move around this little like targeting reticle all around your scene. Its power isn't really evident just by moving this little graphic around. We really need to do some things with it. So we're going to want to add an object. So let's just add a mesh if you don't already have one. Let's just add a simple cube. And with the simple cube in our scene and our origin cursor object selected, you notice we can still move it all around. Now, something cool happens when we hit Shift S. It gives us some options on how we want to manipulate our scene in relation to that cursor and our origin. Now, the first one I want you to try is Cursor to World Origin. With Shift and S selected, just click on Cursor to World Origin. And when you release, it's going to put your cursor, let's press Shift S, Cursor to World Origin, and when you make sure you get it clicked, it goes to the origin of our world. Now the origin is the intersection of the crosshairs of your X, Y, and Z axis. This is like the origin of the universe of your scene. So whether you're left, right, up, or down, this is 0.0.0 in terms of its location. So if at any point your cursor, your 3D cursor gets moved all around, you can simply press Shift S, click Cursor to World Origin, and then release. Now why does this matter? Well, there's some conveniences when you do this Shift S, Cursor to World Origin, is that you can then do the same thing with your object selected. So I can do things like, right click and set my object origin to the 3D cursor, meaning it's going to now change this object's pivot point to where the cursor is, which is actually at the origin of our scene. This can give you some control that you might be familiar with if you're coming from places like After Effects or Illustrator. Let me show you what I mean. If we're going to scale this object, it is now going to scale from that origin point, which is quite nice. If we rotate this object, it will rotate from this pivot point. That's quite nice. Now we can right click and set the origin to the geometry, and that puts it back in the center of our cube. So this is non-destructive, and we can make these changes pretty quickly for our benefit. Something else fancy we can do. Right now, my cursor is just kind of floating about. My origin is in the center of my cube, but if I wanted to, say, stretch this out from like this exact point in the top right corner of my cube, I can do that with a few careful clicks. And I'll take these slowly because it can get kind of disorienting. To set your cursor, you're going to use Shift S. But to set your pivot point, you're going to select an object in object mode, and you're going to right click to set origin. All right, so we're going to do this in a couple of steps. Here we go. First, I'm going to go into edit mode, so that way I can select just this point in the top right corner. Then, pressing Shift S to set my cursor, I'm going to choose Set Cursor to Selected. That put my cursor, if you can see my little life preserver, into that exact perfect, pixel perfect point in the top right. Then, I'm going to go back into object mode, and I'm going to set this one using right click to origin to the 3D cursor. So that's put my pivot point and the cursor in that top right spot of my cube. This is helpful because then I can use the scale tool to do some really cool, like boing, scaling, bounce, squash, stretch, that sort of thing. And I can be very precise in how and from where that scaling occurs. Now, if I want to change these things back, you know the drill. Shift S to handle my cursor. Let's go Cursor to World Origin. And back in object mode, right click on the object to set its origin to the geometry, and that puts it in the center. Or I could set origin, set geometry to origin, which then would put my geometry where that pivot point is. So this is some things like if I really wanted my geometry back to the origin, I could click here, set my origin to 3D cursor, that puts it there. right click, set geometry to origin, and that would put it in the center. So you can see there's these two things that are kind of working together. The origin point of your object and the 3D cursor can work hand in hand, using one to connect to another and vice versa, just to give you precise control over where your objects are placed and how different transformations such as scale and rotation, how they behave and how they impact your shapes.